Thanks everyone for joining. Yes, Jennifer, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself. So I think all of you guys know Jennifer. She's been a coach for, I think, over 25 years, working in corporate for 29 years, and specializing in anxiety for the last 4 years. And she's helping people overcome anxiety and realizing that anxiety is their friend, and not and basically using it to their advantage. So we're here today to see how to overcome anxiety, what it is, how it can manifest in everyday life, and basically how Jennifer can help you if that's something that you're struggling with. So Jennifer, yes, tell us a little bit about your story, please. Well, how did you come to do what you're doing today?
Into it, to be honest. I have struggled with anxiety, well, since I was a child. But back then, many years ago, we didn't recognise it as being anxiety. I was just a very shy, awkward kid. And the most defining moment for me was when I was at school and I was not paying too much attention, as usual. It was the beginning of high school and the classrooms were in a quad layout and I was busy looking out the window. And then I heard my name and I was called up to speak at the front of the classroom. And that was something that I absolutely hated to do, because I hated to be the centre of attention. I hated to be in front of the crowd. It was all a little bit overwhelming. So I got up to the front of the classroom. I didn't know which page of the book I was meant to read out. I had the book open in front of me. Someone shouted out the page and I started reading. I was stumbling over my words, and the paragraph had a word that was split over 2 lines. The word was champagne, ironically, and I couldn't pronounce it. I couldn't work out the word, so I said champagne, and the class erupted into laughter. I was bright red. I was shaking. I was sweating. I was anxious. That moment has stayed with me for life. And I sort of went home and I said to my dad, an awful day, really, really bad. And he said, it's okay, Jen, it's not a problem. We're just not good at stuff like that. We're not good at socialising with people. We're not good at mixing with people. We're better off just keeping our heads down and not getting involved with others. Okay, that's fine. I had a solution. Keep my head down and not get involved. So I went through the whole of school quite shy, quite kept to myself, didn't have too many friends. I was very short, overweight. My family used to call me Mrs. Michelin, and it sort of stuck with me as I was just a little fat person, really, had no confidence. So when I went through school, I was always going to go and be a secretary with my dad's company, and I left school, and on the last day I went up to London with a friend of mine, and she was going into an employment agency, and she asked me if I'd go with her on the train. So I sat there in the agency and they asked me to fill in a few forms, which I did. And that afternoon in 1987, I landed a job in an investment bank. So I was this shy little girl from Chelmsford, now working in investment banking. It was 1987. The stock market was at its height and then it crashed. And everything changed. I liked it. I was fine doing things in London. I got a bit more confidence. I got my first boyfriend. He helped me get more confident. And life carried on as it was. And I ended up progressing higher and higher up the career ladder. Now, I wasn't ever ambitious, but I kept on getting promoted. And it was as much as a surprise to me as it was to anybody else. But looking back now, I can realise how it happened. I was constantly trying to hide behind the people that were in my team. So I was very, very good at empowering everyone else, whilst I still suffered massively with imposter syndrome, and I kept having anxiety breakdowns constantly. I was always having panic attacks. I couldn't walk into a meeting room without being really, really flustered. I'd always make sure I'd be coming in with other staff, other members of my team. I'd walk in behind them, and I'd basically try and make myself as inconspicuous as possible. Because I was constantly
Did you realize
empowering.
that at the time, that that's what you were doing? Did you
No,
realize
no, I had no idea at the time. But because I kept on empowering everyone, because I was trying to hide, that was why I kept getting promoted, which was just crazy, really. And this imposter syndrome just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it looked like I was living the dream. I'd been working in New York, I'd been working in Stockholm, Germany, I've been in Holland, I've been in Spain, had nice cars, had a boat. You know, I had everything, materialistic things. But I wasn't getting time to, yeah, but I wasn't getting time to see my daughter. So she was then going up to senior school, hence brought me back to the time when I had such a horrific time. And I decided now was time to quit London. I'd fallen out of love with the job. My team didn't need me. There was nothing more I could add to them. I put them to the place that they could be the best that they could be at that, as far as I could take them. And I decided to quit. So I left London and I came home and I thought, oh shit, now what do I do? And I decided to take a year out and work out what I really, really wanted to do. And I decided that the bit I loved doing was coaching everybody else and helping other people to be more empowered. But how the hell do you put that into a job? What can you put on a CV that tells you that's what you like doing? So someone suggested I went and spoke to a life coach, which is what I did. And I really liked what she was doing and what she had to say. I went to see another life coach and I really liked what he had to say too. And one of them I was seeing for personal reasons and one of them I was seeing for business reasons. And they were both saying to me, but you should be doing this. Why are you not doing this? Why are you being, one of them used the word selfish, by not sharing what you already know? And I thought about it a little bit more and I went and did a bit more training, and it suddenly then dawned on me that I'd had anxiety all this time. I just hadn't labelled it as such. I'd labelled it as I was not very good in social situations, imposter syndrome, because really I shouldn't have been doing the job that I was doing in my head. I wasn't very interesting, or I didn't know much about anything. You know, I wasn't capable of doing much at all. And then I realised it hit me. So I then started on a bit of a mission. I went on a 10-day silent retreat to work out what it was I really wanted to do. There was no talking, and those of you that know me now know that that was not easy. There was not even any eye contact with anyone. And I came out of there being 100% clear on what I wanted to do. The world was full of anxiety. The thing that was holding us all back was fear. It was the fear of being judged. It was the fear of failure. It was the fear of overwhelm. It all came back to anxiety. And that's when I realised it was obvious that I needed to get involved with it.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing this story. It's really an interesting journey. And I think what stands out is that how you didn't realize that for all these years.
And the thing is, we're so busy living, we're so used to living the life that we know, we don't ever challenge the way we behave.
Yeah,
so I didn't question it.
Absolutely. And isn't it funny how one moment in life, let's say when your father told you that that's who we are, that's what we do, can define you unless you realize that and challenge that belief. It can define you for potentially the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
It takes years to realize that. So before we dig into anxiety, I think it's useful, at least for me, it'd be useful to define what it really is, because I think there's so much over, it can mean so many different things, doesn't it? So what is it for you? What is it that you help people with?
It's the fear of being judged by others, and quite often it is limiting beliefs. We learn a lot of this, I call it BS. It's your belief system.
Yeah.
But BS is very appropriate. We learn a lot of this about the age of 5 upwards. So a coping strategy that I had at 5 years old, I was still using at 40 years old. Now, life's moved on and those same coping strategies don't work. But unless you know to look outside of yourself and what you already know, you carry on making the same mistakes. You carry on living the same life with the same things. And you need someone to say to you, hang on a minute, what makes you think that what you're thinking is right? And we don't have those conversations. So that was one of the main reasons I was able to have those conversations with people that I used to be working with, when they used to say to me, I can't do this, I don't know it, I'm not technically minded, I don't have the right, whatever it would be. I could then say to other people, yes, you do, you absolutely do, and this is how we can do it. But I couldn't see it in myself. So when I left London, I then decided I got involved with a lot of charities, and through working with different charities, I was able to recognise just how many of these traits I had myself, and that's how I think it's good for me, because I've got a really broad range of experiences with working with different cultures in different countries, working with people from all walks of life, through my charity work. You can see I've been exposed to different ways of thinking that I've been very, very lucky to have, because I've got quite a broad vision of it all, and not all of us do. So that is why I think I can bring something to the table for most people.
Okay, so when do people usually come to you? Is it, I think we spoke about this before with you, that some people, or most people, realize they have anxiety when something major happens in their life. In fact, I have a personal experience with this. I mean, I've always been kind of anxious, but it really manifested itself a few years ago when I had a lot of stress in my life. And I think that's the case for most people. So when people come to work with you, how do they get to a point where they say, okay, I need to do something about it? What's the trigger for them to start working?
It varies. I had one man that his son actually approached me because his dad could no longer leave the house. He was so anxious about leaving the house. And his son asked me if there's anything I could do. I agreed to go and speak to this gentleman. And the first meeting we had was through his lounge window, because he wouldn't come to the door, he wouldn't open the door, but he would open the window a little bit. And one of the things that I do is I try and take people outside, because I really, really think being out in nature is so good for anxiety and our mental health in general. I take people on walk and talk. So now we go walking on a regular basis. And that did take a while. It took about 6 months to get there. But, you know, it's one extreme to another. And that's probably, for me, one of the biggest feels of the work that I do. You can see the progress that people make. And another client of mine had a panic attack when he was a very successful man, hedge fund manager, and he'd had a panic attack whilst he was away on holiday, and he just couldn't get over that. It had impacted every area of his life. He'd been in therapy for about 5-6 years before he met me, and then we've worked to overcome that as well. And I think one of the things that I should mention is a lot of people rely on CBT, cognitive behaviour therapy, and a lot of my clients have come to me because they've had CBT and it doesn't work. Now, I do think it's a great thing to get people unstuck and to get you thinking differently, but I don't think it solves the underlying problem. So I use a combination of CBT together with other techniques to help people overcome it. One of the other ways people come to me is parents often ask me to work with their children, be it teenagers or in their mid to late 20s, early 30s. It often takes somebody else to notice they've got anxiety. So it could be a variety of different reasons, really.
Okay, and tell us a bit about these walk and talk. I think that's really interesting, because not a lot of people do that.
No, that's a back from when I worked in Sweden, and Sweden are amazingly good at getting us all understanding the importance of nature. So I was working particularly long hours, and I never had a chance to take a lunch break or anything. But what the Swedes always did was make sure they got out in daylight. And you know, in winter it gets dark really early, so you don't have a long window to be outside in daylight. So I used to start having all my meetings going for a walk when I lived in Sweden, and it worked particularly well. It's very, very good as well if you're in conflict with somebody and you're trying to get your opinion across and they don't agree with you. If you're in a work environment, if I took someone out for a walk, completely disarmed, then you could have a much more open conversation. There wasn't this, they weren't trying to fight you to get their opinion across. It just changed the dynamics of everything. So I continued doing walks and talks or walking meetings in the corporate world. And it just seemed obvious to me to do it in my own practice. I personally would far rather be outside. I do see people in my consultancy room, but I'd far rather be outside in nature. So it was the next best thing.
That's amazing. I think that is
people open up a lot more.
Yeah, also because you, as you say, you walk side by side, so you don't have that eye contact, which can be quite stressful. And also you look far ahead, so it opens up your mind. As opposed to looking 1 meter ahead of you, or just straight into the person's eyes. That's really
and your posture's different. Your posture, you sort of stand up, your shoulders are back when you're walking.
Yeah.
If I see people that come to my consultancy room, they're sort of far more enclosed, whereas you're more open to ideas when you're walking. And I used to laugh a lot being in the corporate world when they used to talk about things like blue sky thinking, and I said, oh God, whatever. There's some truth in it. I now see it. People are more open to sharing ideas and looking at things differently when you are outside in nature.
Yeah, your horizon is completely different. That's amazing. And you know what? I've worked with coaches for a few years now, helping them with social media and promotion and stuff like that. And I've spoken to probably a couple of hundred coaches at least. And I know one person, but he's somewhere, I think she's somewhere in Northern England. You're the second person out of hundreds I know that does this. So it's really, really, really rare, but it's such a fascinating concept. So it's incredible. In terms of the way you work, I mean, I could talk about approaches to healing anxiety or whatever it may be for ages, but I just want the highlights of how you work, because I know you have quite a unique approach to how you work. And as you mentioned, CBT is something that most people know, because that's pretty much the only approach to dealing with anxiety that's approved by the NHS, right?
Yeah.
So it is. To me, it's a shame that they're not more open to more approaches. But in any case, tell us a bit more about the things that you work with. So you combine CBT and what else?
I trained in NLP, Neuro-Linguistics Program, and neuroscience, and I found the two of them were invaluable. So neuro-linguistic programming would very much look at the way we talk to ourselves, the way we, our beliefs, the way we speak. And the neurology, the brain pathways that we create. So it will enables us to change your neural pathways as they are right now. An example I could use, I think I've spoken to you about it before, dear, but if you take a London taxi driver, and he's very, very good at driving around London, they have to do the knowledge, and it takes them 4 or 5 years to be able to train for it. Now, the hippocampus in their brain, which is the part of the brain that is responsible for memory and spatial alignment, it actually gets bigger in a London taxi driver. So what that's proved to us is that we can change the shape of our brains. It's not fixed. We can change them as we go along. And this is something that neuro-linguistic program very much works with. So we change the neural pathways that you've got. We do a lot of timeline therapy, so we'll go back in time a particular event. You don't need to share that event with me either. So it could be something that you just discuss, internally in your head, and we'll look at the lessons that you've learned from back then, and we'll apply those throughout your timeline into the future, however it's appropriate. But I'm a big fan of neuro-linguistic programming. The other thing, it assumes we all have the knowledge within us to know what to do. So to give you an example of that, an example that I did myself, I was going to a place called Bike Park, Wales. I've got a few of my biking buddies on here. And it was going to be the first time I was mountain biking. and I was petrified of getting to the top of the mountain, going over the edge and losing all control. So I worked with someone else, and they said to me, well, what do you need? And I needed stability, I needed confidence, and I needed determination. So we looked at 3 different examples where I know I've got stability, confidence, and determination, and we applied those 3 principles to the moment I was going to launch myself off the edge and do the mountain biking. And we use a lot of visualization as well, storytelling. And to be fair, the first time I tried mountain biking, I aced it. I'm not quite as confident now because I've fallen off a few times, but I was fine the first time. But we can do a lot of techniques like that. So as you can imagine from hearing my story, I was petrified of public speaking. And throughout my whole corporate life, I never, ever stood up and gave a talk. Whereas now I stand up in front of corporates talking about anxiety management, and I'm happy to speak in front of 300 people. And I use NLP a lot to help me through that. One of the other techniques I use is EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, and it involves a lot of tapping. So it's not dissimilar to acupuncture, where we tap through energy points in the body, but we, instead of using needles, I use tapping, and we say different things as well. So we try and inspire each other. So I inspire you to repeat after me, and talk yourself through something that could be a limiting belief or a blockage that you have. So I use a few different techniques to move forward, but also to let the past catch up with you in a more positive way.
So do you tailor your approach to every individual? So the
absolutely, yes,
or the even the structure of the sessions, as I imagine you would tailor it to every person, the structure of the sessions or the sequence. I guess there is no set model as to, okay, this is what we do first, and then second, and then third. And
some people respond better to things than others. So it could be a couple of the NLP techniques I use would be great for a couple of people, but not for everybody. And some clients really resonate with certain things. So obviously we'll do more of that. Some people are very good at visualizing, others not so much so. So it depends very much on the individual and what it is we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that what you believe in matters as well? I'll tell you a bit of background for my question. EFT, emotional freedom technique, is actually what changed my life initially. It's what someone introduced to me in a very scientific way. Before they even explained the actual tapping, they said it actually helps you disconnect your prefrontal cortex, so you tap into your subconscious mind. And I said, okay, that makes sense. Then I realized it actually comes from Chinese medicine, which is, a whole different story, but at the end of the day, perhaps it's just a different way of explaining the same thing. But for me, this has been really, really really helpful, and it makes me wonder where it comes down to what you actually believe would work for you, or it's just a matter of how you process information, and whether it's, as you said, you're good with visualizing things and so on.
I think there's an element of both, to be fair. Like I said, a lot of my clients have come to me through other people. So it's not the client themselves that have referred themselves. It's a parent or a son referred me to his dad. People can be a little bit more skeptical when they first come, but when they start to see results for the first time, they trust it the second time. And there are some techniques that much fail-safe techniques that I can use on people initially, that then they'll start believing in the system. So I haven't found that to be a problem, even if people are skeptical initially.
Okay, so they just open up to it as they get to know you, and trust you. I think that relationship between you and the client is really, really important, because maybe more than belief, it's about putting their trust in you, that you can help them and empower them. Like you said. Which leads me to the next question. Tell us a little bit about the Empower program. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here, but I think it's a good time to tell us a bit about that.
Sure. So I decided there's 7 different principles that we all needed to understand and pass through to get over our anxiety. And start off, so the Proven Empower program, you've got each letter, EMPOWER, and we start off with the enlightening education enterprise. We then go on to the motivating mindset masterclass, the powerful purpose provider, the optimal ownership opportunity, the wonderful what, why, when and where workshop, effective empowerment experience, and the revolutionary relaxation recipe. So within those 7 modules, we work through different areas of your life. Question what you know today. So it would include the first category, the first module would all be about education, and we talk about what anxiety is. Now, anxiety has been around since time began. It's the reptilian part of our brain that holds the fight, flight, freeze response, and it's 200 million years old. If we didn't have this response, we'd be dead as a species. It has been what's kept us alive all these years. So, for example, if you were to step out on the road in front of a passing car and it beeped and you jumped back into the pavement, that is your anxiety that has kept you safe. And it can be a bit like a physical pain. It's a bit like if you put your hand on a hot stove and pull your hand away. Anxiety is instinctive. So there's no decision involved, it is just instinctive. And it then releases a lot of the stress hormones, the cortisol, which is a good time actually to bring in the fact that this will impact on our immunity system, especially right now when we're all in lockdown. A really important time is to manage your fear and your anxiety. Whilst it's a completely normal reaction to have, and one that we should be having right now, we need to be able to manage it and have special tools and techniques that can help us, because we want to obviously boost our immunity back up. So anxiety is a good thing. However, it can get to the stage where it's too overwhelming and we can't control it. And that is when we need help to manage it. A lot of anxiety comes from learned behaviours. We can inherit it from, like I said, very, very young age. We also, there's a saying by Mark Twain, that I've had a lot of troubles in my life, and some of them even happened. And I think that sums it up really well.
Yeah.
Because 91% of all the things that we worry about never actually happen. There's only 9% of the things that we worry about that actually come true, and over half of those are more positive than we predicted. When we break anxiety down into the reality of it and look back and see what actually was worth worrying about, it's very little. So we work through, in the program, we work through how we can change our way we're thinking. We can become friends with anxiety. We can appreciate it's always trying to tell us something, and there's always something we can learn from it. So that's what the program's about. So from the educational side of things, because anxiety can be split into many different parts. There's your generalized anxiety, there's social anxiety, which is the one that I really struggled with. Panic disorder, OCD, phobias. There's multiple different ways that anxiety can show itself, but it all comes down to something else that's underlying the anxiety. It's something that's worried us in the past, and we have a physical response to it in our body. So if you have a situation, whatever it is, will trigger a thought, that will trigger a feeling or an emotion, that will trigger a behaviour, and then you'll have a physical reaction to it. That physical reaction might be that you get butterflies in your tummy, or you start having really shallow breathing, or your palms sweat, or your face goes red, or a number of different things. You feel numbness, tingling. I find the easiest way to recognise when you're feeling anxious is to focus on that physical sensation, because these thoughts come and go so quickly that they're not always easy to catch. But if you can feel in your body where you feel anxiety, you can start working a little bit closer with it. So if you understand the physical aspect of it, you can question, well, how am I behaving? Well, hang on, I'm behaving a little bit erratically. I'm being a bit grumpy, or short-tempered, or procrastinating, or whatever it is. Okay, well, if that's my behaviour, what was I thinking? What emotion? I was angry. Why was I angry? Well, I just thought about that situation that so-and-so over there didn't. They just ignored me. They just walked past me and ignored me. Well, hang on a minute. Maybe they didn't see you. So you just start thinking of things in a different way. It's a way of unraveling that thought process, because it all happens so quickly. So we go from the educational side, seeing how we have coping mechanisms. So we could do a number of things. We could turn to wine. That was one of my favourites. We could become perfectionists at everything. We wouldn't do anything unless it's absolutely perfect, and that in itself is completely and utterly draining. We could overeat, or we could numb ourselves with sitting in front of box sets and playing video games. Now, don't get me wrong, all of these are fine behaviours. There's nothing wrong with them if they're done in moderation. But if they're done to hide something else, something that's underlying, that's when the problems occur. And that's what we try and unravel. Why are we trying to numb? What are we hiding from? So that's the first step. And then we work on looking at mindset and how we can think differently. We all have cognitive, what we call cognitive distortions. And that would be things like catastrophizing, black and white thinking, mind telling, fortune telling, or mind reading, sorry. There's a number of different ways that we think that it's the anxiety talking, not logical way of thinking. So we unravel those as well, and we start recognizing them. So we do use CBT to recognize our thoughts and try and catch them. We keep diaries, and then we know what we're addressing. So I'm not knocking CBT completely at all. I'm saying it doesn't solve the underlying problem. We look at managing moods, we look at managing states. My favourite one is, I teach laughter yoga as well. And what it means is, if you start laughing or smiling, so I used to always tell my daughter to put a pen in her mouth when she was getting grumpy, because it makes you smile. And when you smile, your brain doesn't know if you're actually happy or whether you're forcing it. And the same with the laughter yoga. When we start laughing, our brain doesn't know if we're faking it or really enjoying it, and it releases the same endorphins. So we work on a lot of those things too. We measure with the thought diary, and then we manage with gratitude journal or journaling in general, so we can start tracking things. So you're going to see results as you go along. The next one of the module is looking at what is our purpose, why are we here, what are we trying to achieve. I think this is my favourite module, really. This is where people, you really get the penny drop moments. It's looking at understanding who you are, how you got to be where you are, what you want to be, and do you want to change anything? And this is where people, life-changing things happen, during this module, really. So that's why it's one of my favourites. And that's where we start putting decisions into place so that how we can change things. The next one is the optimal ownership opportunity, and we look at what we're hiding from, we acknowledge all thoughts. If we push something away, I believe we push the solution away too. If we acknowledge what we're feeling, then we bring the solution closer to us. We can't find a solution to something we're hiding from. So we have to acknowledge it in the first place. But because we've been through this learning process up till now, it's not a scary process. We're open to acknowledging it because we can see that you're moving further forward. Next step is the wonderful what and why workshop, and we go through what is my anxiety trying to tell me, when do I feel connected to other people, who is in my social circle and my environment, how do I feel about my my identity, my role. So quite often that's someone's job, you know, are they feeling valued, or it could be their role in the family, and why am I here, yeah, what am I here to do. That's pretty empowering. It comes down to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I don't know if any of you've come across that, but after that we go on to the effective empowerment experience, where how can we use this to our advantage. I'm a big fan of giving back, and I think, well, I know personally I have learned far more about myself from helping others. When I'm ever feeling a little bit down, the best thing I can do is help other people. I've got a few of my other volunteers on the line at the moment, so you know what I'm talking about. And then the last one is the revolutionary relaxation recipe, and we talk a lot about mindfulness here, breathing exercises, the importance of movement, the importance of Mother Nature, like I said, being outside, exposing yourself to situations that you wouldn't necessarily get involved with, pushing your comfort zone. And then by the time of all of that's come to an end, you're thinking, what anxiety? Why was I worried? So it is powerful. It is powerful.
That's really, really good. And it seems to me that it's not just helping, you don't just help people overcome the anxiety or make it their friend, but as you said, there's the purpose module, there are all these different things. So it's more about, it's also about rediscovering or reinventing, if you wish, you know, yourself, and discovering what actually makes you tick, and where, in which situations you said, with which people you feel better, why you're here, and all kind of stuff, which is all related. And until you start asking yourself those questions, you're kind of living somebody else's life.
Well, you're letting life happen to you,
Yeah,
rather than
exactly.
creating the life that you want. So this is all about creating the life that you actually want to have. And yeah. I've found that myself and a lot of my clients, they've hidden behind the anxiety and not moved forward. So once we start going through programs like this, you know, one of them's now started, you know, she's now teaching a drama school. She's opened up her own drama school, and beforehand she wasn't like to be up on stage. Now, it was her passion. Dancing was her passion. She couldn't get from dancing in a living room, and now she's running her own business with it. So it is life changing.
Yeah, it really is. And as you said, until something happens that makes us realize that we are, you know, we're just floating through life without actually living it, we don't even know. We just, that's what everything we've ever known. So what do you have any advice? Now I hope that you get to help more and more people, because I think a lot of people need this. I don't know what the statistics are. I think we talked about this before, about how many people. 1 in 4. Yeah, 1 in 4. But that's the official statistics, isn't it? So
I think it's much higher.
It's much higher. And I think especially these days, with kids these days, let's say, where parents are working, you grow up in constant anxiety. You grow up surrounded by social media, which there the constant quick dopamine rushes, which completely mess up your brain. And then obviously there's a social pressure, then there's your parents not being around, so you're not having enough attention. It's probably highly correlated with anxiety as well. It's just, you grow up in surrounded by, you know, anxious parents, constantly stressed out about work. So what are the odds that you grow up not anxious at all? I don't think there's any chance of that happening. So
no, and you know, anxiety is normal. We all feel it, all of us. So if we're sitting a driving test or going for a job interview, it's normal to get anxious. So, it's not something that anyone avoids. But I work with one of the charities that I work with, called Just Futures. Children are 5 years old, and they have no self-esteem. They have no resiliency. They are just, well, they're constantly anxious. They are playing up. I mean, I take calls for a helpline, and we get calls constantly for people that are children are being violent and they're behaving so badly because they're just so frustrated. They don't know how to deal with their emotions. And I think that's anxiety that's coming through, but nobody is saying, okay, that 5-year-old is anxious and it needs help. They're saying that 5-year-old is anxious. What pills can we give them? Now, obviously, the pills, they have a time and a place. I'm not knocking them completely, but they do not get to the underlying problem. And it's the underlying issue that has to be addressed here.
Absolutely, it's the root cause, the underlying issue. Yeah, and that's the issue with a lot of approaches to it, whether it's medication or other more superficial approaches to looking at the issue. There is rarely a comprehensive approach to looking at it. It's either a quick fix, give you pills. Actually, I talk a lot about that in my book, or some superficial approach, or talking about it for the next 24 years until maybe something clicks.
Yeah.
But there's ways to do things like the way you do it, which combines finding the root cause, reframing your thinking, as well as letting go of the trauma and the emotional attachment to the event that happened in the past, as well as changing your behavior, as well as, and all of these things together is what creates the change.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's not one thing or the other. It's all of these things together, because we get into the habit of acting in a certain way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm laughing because we've got a GP on the line here as well. Sorry,
Emma. Sorry.
No, I know that she agrees. So yeah, it is a holistic approach. We need to have a holistic approach to everything, and there's not one. There is a time and a place, but if we can do it without having negative side effects, then I'm all for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any advice you would want to give to people now, given the current situation of COVID-19, which I'm sure causes even more anxiety in people? Is there any advice how to deal with it, or generally more stressful situations?
I would suggest that it's okay not to be okay at the moment. There is an awful lot going on out there. We are surrounded by negativity. And one of the things I talk about on the course is that we have a negativity bias. So what that means is, if we were to, again, evolutionary, if we were to be living out on the plains and we had a saber-toothed tiger jump out at us, we need to remember what that feels like to avoid that situation again. If, on the other hand, we go skipping through a nice flowering meadow, we don't actually need to remember that too much, because it won't keep us safe. It's a lovely idea, but it won't keep us safe. So we actually have this negativity bias, and it means that we dwell on negative things more than we do on positive things, which is why if someone gives you an insult or offends you, you are going to remember that far more likely, far more intensely, if they gave you a compliment. It's how we're made, how we're built. So try and limit what you're reading in the papers and what you're listening to. Try and stick to reliable resources. Try and bring some positivity into the situation. There's newspapers, a newspaper out there called Happyful that just fills in nice stories. There's lots of good news that we can also look for. Helping others, I think, is the main thing. And again, looking at who's on here, I can see a few of you. Giving back, I think, is one of the most powerful ways to feel in control. It helps us boost our self-esteem. It helps release the endorphins in us as well as in other people. So I think that is a really important part. Also, focus on what you can control versus what you can't control. So we have this thing called the circle of influence. And basically, if you were to draw a circle and you write in there everything that you can control. So you can control your routine, what time you get up, what time you go to bed, when you sleep, when you go out and do your exercise, whether you decide to shower that morning, what you decide to eat, what you're going to, there's loads of things we can control. And they should all go in that center circle. When you phone your friends, when you We're FaceTiming later, aren't we, a few of us? So when you get in contact with different people, all of that is within our control. Draw a circle out of that, and that's our circle of influence. So that might be things that we have some influence over, but we can't control. And then your last circle is outside of your control. So at the moment, lockdown, when it gets lifted, is completely and utterly outside of our control. There is nothing that we can do to make that date change. So anything that is in that outer circle is just not worth worrying about. There's nothing we can do. So if we can focus back on what we can control instead of what we can't, we will feel more in control, in a happier place. That would be my recommendation. Exercise, make sure you get outside. A few people have said to me they don't feel that they can get outside unless they've got a dog. That's crazy. Get outside, walk, get out on your bike, do some yoga. All of these things make us feel better about ourselves. So there's a lot we can all do. Stay in contact, I'd say, is the most critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And the positive thinking in a way, focusing on a positive, because the news can definitely be so overwhelming, and it's necessary to probably to follow everything and to engage in that negativity that's going on constantly. Is there anything else you would like to add? And also, if somebody wants to work with you, I know there are different options to do that. So what is the best way to contact you or to just to start working with you?
Lovely. Well, you can get in touch with me via my website. That is www.betteryourlife.co.uk, or you can reach me on Facebook at BYL for Better Your Life Anxiety Management. That's Anxiety MGMP. Or you can call me. My number is 07503 067941. And if you wanted to get involved in the courses that I'm running, I'm offering 20% off of everything that I do at the moment whilst we're in lockdown. And if you're interested in getting involved in the course, then there'll be an additional 20% off the one on this line today.
And when and where is the course?
The course will be online. So I normally sell it for £400. With the 20% COVID lockdown, it will be $320. And then you'll get an additional 20% off of that too. So.
Okay, wonderful. So if anyone is interested, I will post all that information. No. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. I'll see you next time. Bye. Bye.